All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into the bumpy, chaotic, and pretty revolutionary story of how modern France actually built its national road network.
So, how do you actually unite a nation? Well, way before cars, before trains even, the answer was, pretty fundamental. It was literally made of dirt and stone.
Yep, one road at a time. And this is that story. A massive 35-year struggle to connect a kingdom, to survive a revolution, and then build an empire. We're going to see it all through the roads of southwestern France. So, here's our game plan. We'll start with the messy patchwork kingdom, then get into the very real human cost of progress. We'll hit the revolutionary roadblocks, see Napoleon's grand design, and finally, look at the unfinished journey. Okay, let's dive right in. Okay, first up, a patchwork kingdom. The roads of pre-revolutionary France. And you gotta understand, before 1789, the road network in southwestern France, well, it wasn't really a network at all. It was more like a patchwork quilt, with some really jarring contrasts. And I mean, look at this. On one hand, you had regions like Languedoc, which were actually pretty well developed. We're talking almost 1,500 meters of road for every 10 square kilometers. But then, right next door, you have places like Bordeaux and Montauban, and they had less than 60 meters. That's not a small difference. That is a massive gap. You basically had these little islands of modernity surrounded by a sea of, well, medieval neglect. And even where the roads were good, travel was still a total adventure. There was this English writer, Arthur Young, and he was just blown away by the incredible bridges and roads in Languedoc. But then he gets to these major towns, and he's totally baffled. No rental carriages, no decent inns to stay at. It's like the road was great, but it didn't connect to any of the services a traveler actually, needed. So getting around meant dealing with all this crazy, inconsistent stuff. You'd have to cross huge rivers like the Dordogne and the Garonne on these sketchy ferries because, nope, no bridges. Your carriage could literally get stuck in the sand in the Landes region. And getting a letter from Paris, that could take 8, even 11 days. It was just this mix of paved roads and then dirt tracks. So, it all begs the question, how were these good roads even getting built? And maybe more importantly, what was the real cost?
Right? The human cost of progress and the debate over the corvée royale. Because that progress, well, it came at a really steep price. A price paid almost entirely by the poorest citizens through a system of forced, unpaid labor.
And that system was called the corvée royale. Just think about this. Peasants were literally ripped away from their own farms for weeks at a time to do this absolutely back-breaking construction work for no pay. It was brutal, and people hated it. As the Parliament of Toulouse put it, these laborers were treated like convicts. This became a huge central grievance that would eventually explode into the revolution. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because it shows just how divided people were right before the revolution. Everybody hated the corvée, sure, but what was the solution? You had the village of Angos demanding what sounds pretty modern to us, get rid of it and create a fair tax for everyone, nobles, church, everybody. But then you have the nearby village of Caixon, and they were so poor, so incredibly poor, they were actually begging for forced labor to come back. Why? Because they simply couldn't afford to pay any new tax, no matter how small. It's a real catch-22.
So, on to our third chapter, Revolutionary Roadblocks. How those grand dreams met a very harsh reality. See, the revolution kicked off with this amazing vision, a fair, unified, national road network paid for by taxes that everyone contributed to. But that beautiful dream, it collided head-on with the absolute chaos of the era.
And that dream just crumbled, almost right away. First, they decentralized control, but the new taxes just didn't bring in enough money. Then, boom, war breaks out. All the men, the horses, the materials, they're all diverted to the army. Roadwork just grinds to a halt. Then, during the terror, things get really desperate. The state actually brings back forced labor, only now they call it patriotic work. The final nail in the coffin comes in 1795 when the national currency, the assignat, becomes totally worthless. All funding for public works just poof, evaporates. The system didn't just stumble, it completely and utterly collapsed. Yeah, the words of an engineer on the ground at the time, a guy named Laupiès, they just capture the crisis perfectly. A shortage of men and horses. By 1799, an official report confirmed that the roads were in a state of increasing degradation. They were actually worse than they had been under the king. So the dream of progress had gone into reverse, and this created a huge power vacuum, an opening for one man to step in and impose his will, Napoleon.
And that brings us to Napoleon's grand design, moving from chaos to control. When Napoleon seized power, he inherited an absolute wreck of a road network. And his approach? It was purely pragmatic, totally centralized, and driven by one thing above all: military necessity.
So, we're moving from chaos to control. See, Napoleon's goal wasn't about making life better for every little village. No, it was about military control, about securing his empire. And to do that, his administration just tossed out all the old systems and imposed a brand new, rational order, right from the top down.
And this new system he put in place was a total game changer. Everything was centralized. He created this clear hierarchy of roads, imperial, departmental, and then focused state funds, tolls, and taxes on the most important military routes. But maybe the most crucial innovation was professionalizing the maintenance. He got rid of forced labor and brought in salaried roadmen, the cannoneers. And by doing that, Napoleon created a reliable, professional system for keeping the roads in shape, a blueprint that would honestly shape France for the next 100 years.
Okay, part 5, an unfinished journey. The final tally in 1815. So, after 35 years of royal ambition, revolutionary chaos, and then imperial order, what was the actual result? Well, that dream of a fully connected nation? It was still very much a dream.
And if you look at the official reports from 1812, it's like a report card, and it paints this deeply uneven picture. Napoleon's military focus meant that the strategic road to Spain, going through places like Lens and Gironde, saw huge improvements. But other areas that had no military value, like the rugged Aveyron region, they were just completely left behind. The reports described their roads as barely sketched out or just plain bad. The old problems, those old disparities, were still there.
Which brings us to this perfect description from the source material. The result was a moth-eaten lacework of roads. I think that's brilliant. Napoleon had built this strong skeleton, right? The major arteries that were absolutely vital for moving his armies. But all the smaller veins and capillaries, the little roads needed to really connect the country, to pull villages out of isolation and create one unified economy, they were still missing.
So this entire era built the skeleton for modern France's road system, no doubt about it. But the question that leaves us with is, who was going to add the flesh and blood? The great work was far from over. I mean, the foundation was laid, sure, through ambition and turmoil and imperial command, but finishing the job, actually and truly uniting the nation one road at a time, well, that would be the work of the next generation. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.